Hello and welcome to episode 16 of Matchett and the Other Guy. And Kevin and I are sitting outside my home in Lake Wylie, Charlotte, North Carolina. You know the routine by now. Kevin will pick a subject and we have a conversation about it. Sometimes we even stay on target, typically not. Kevin, what we're talking about today?
Well, actually, the order of episodes is going to kind of follow the actual order of life. In that last episode, we focused on bicycles, which naturally in real life led to first cars. So let's talk about first cars this time around.
First cars, yes. Now that's another great topic. Yeah, my first car was a Ford Escort van.
Van?
A van, yes. And the reason I had a Ford Escort van is because it was the cheapest car that I've told you before, we've discussed before, my first job was at a little Mazda dealer in Loughborough, a little town where I grew up. And on their forecourt, one of the trading cars was a Ford Escort van, which were very popular with little one-man construction firms, you know, plumbers and carpenters and that sort of thing.
I assume paneled sides.
Paneled sides,
Yep.
Two little doors at the back, but basically from the front it looked like a Ford Escort, from the back it looked like a little van.
Did it have windows in the back, or was it even sealed up?
In the rear doors it did, if memory serves, yes. It was a sort of off, they're probably the collectors would probably call it Wimbledon white. It was slightly off-white, a little bit of cream to it.
Yep.
But it was the cheapest car that Howlett's had as a trade-in, and they allowed me to get a very good deal on it. And as soon as I passed my test, that was the car that I had. Actually, before I passed my test, because I had learned to drive in that, actually. And it cost me £175. So it was, I don't
Wow.
know, about $300, I would say. Yeah, something like that.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and how about you?
Mine actually was, and this was 85. I turned 16, and Dad surprised me, and I got a 72 Chevelle.
Oh, wow. No kidding.
Yeah. So
Straight in there.
it was interesting. The funny part was, and we talked about me being into surfing at that time. Well, everybody I knew drove Bugs or some sort of Volkswagen iteration.
Right.
So it was totally different for me to end up with a muscle car, really.
Yeah, right.
So, but it was a great little high school car. All the gearheads really wanted it, and I was like going, I kind of thought I was getting a Bug, but you just go with it. And
And did you really want the Bug, or were you more than happy to have the?
I like the show. I mean, it's great to have freedom and have your own car. And again, it was, looking back, it was even better than I thought it was at the time. But
yeah, no kidding.
it of course had plenty of power. It was a V8 with a 4-barrel carb, and it was a 350.
Yeah.
So it wasn't the SS, but it had bucket seats, and the shifter was between the seats, and I think the GM called that Hydroglide. I can't remember. It was almost, it looked like an airplane.
Oh, I know exactly what you mean. Yes. Yeah. I know exactly.
So it was a little cooler than having it, on the tree where you shifted with the hand lever.
Yes, and to operate your transmission, didn't you have to pull up on the handle?
Yeah, exactly.
In between the seats, just to disengage it and move it, ratchet it forward and backwards.
Yeah, and it had it was a bar shape, and it would be connect on both sides.
Yes,
It slid back and forth with kind of a glass indicator where park, drive, reverse, and stuff was.
Yeah, well, you had a much cooler first car than I ever did. I would have longed to have had a Chevelle. Well done you. Yeah. And my next car after that, and again, we may have chatted about this before, so you stop me if I'm telling this story twice. My second car after that was a Ford Cortina Mark III. And I wanted that car because it looked a little bit like a first-generation Camaro.
Yes, you did mention that one.
Yeah.
Which is still a great story.
Yeah, that was the car that, I mean, I just remember looking in Hot Rod magazine and drag racing magazines in England back at, and there was so little opportunity to visit drag racing strips in England. There really wasn't many. The most famous of all was probably Santa Pod, which was down in Northampton, which wasn't far away from where I grew up. But even Santa Pod, quite frankly, with all due respect to Santa Pod, it always seemed to want more and more renovation work done to the buildings and the track. I never remember it looking in pristine condition, but it was a very popular drag strip in England. I think primarily just because there was so few about, But I do remember being excited by drag racing, particularly looking across from England over to the United States and seeing the big 350s and V8 engines and roaring up and down drag strips, thought this was a really cool 4-barrel Holley's-on. This was something that I wanted to get involved in. And I just remember that the nearest looking car in England to a first generation Camaro was a Mark III Cortina, and I had one of those. And changed the engine over to a V6 because it's the nearest thing to a V8, and put a 4-barrel carburetor on it. And if I remember right, my 4-barrel carburetor that I made fit onto this V6 Ford engine was from an RX-7, a rotary engine Mazda.
Okay, yeah.
Because again, you remember I was working at a little Mazda dealer, and we
true.
occasionally would
the
have
Wankel engine.
Yeah, we would have wrecked cars come in, which we would strip down for parts, and I'm sure that those RX-7s, I mean, again, forgive my memory because we're going back so long, I'm sure they were a 4-barrel carburetor. And it was just the appeal of, to me, I've got to get this 4-barrel carb to work on this V6 in this Ford Cortina. Got to do it. Again, you remember when we were talking about bicycles and I said I never want to feel inadequate, like I can't do this, I want to be able to do it? That's what I set out to do. I thought, I'm going to make this work, I'm going to learn how to do it. And Terry Howlett, who was my boss at the Mazda dealer, was very keen to support me in doing this. He would just allow me to work on the car at nights and at the weekend, and I would lock up the garage. If it was midnight, I would be allowed to lock up the garage and work in the garage with all the tools and everything there in the evenings, you know, so I got that to work. So anyway, that was my second car, a Mark III Cortina that was made to look as close as possible as I could get it to be a first generation Camaro.
Very good, yeah.
So what came after your Chevelle?
Well, I actually had the Chevelle for a good while. I got it in '85. I tend to just hang on to cars for a while. And one of the funny stories with that car is, you know, we lived in Florida when we got it. And I remember, now I think about it, you know, I remember him, before he surprised me, he asked about what color you think's good on a car. And I remember at the time I said white. You know, and that's relative. I mean, white on a Lamborghini Countach is amazing. White on a Volkswagen Bug, kind of boring. But actually, it was very perfect for this car. So it needed a paint job when he got it, and he painted it white. And the funny part is it was originally a two-tone. It didn't have a vinyl top, but it had a white top, green bottom.
Oh, yeah, okay.
But when he got it, it needed so they just painted it completely white. But it always had that trim on the C-pillar where it would have separated.
Yes.
But if it was a solid color car, they wouldn't have had that trim. So it was always unique, and it had that trim break. And it was white vinyl interior. So really for Florida, it was perfect because it didn't heat up.
Yeah.
You know, it gets it in the sun all day. It's not going to burn you getting in it. But, and two, it had, you know, what they would call bucket seats. But back then they were just a single seat, really. There was hardly any bolster. And being vinyl, you go around a corner and you just be sliding across the, you know, like.
I know just what you mean. Yes, a lot of folks refer to seats as being bucket seats, you know, the sort of 50s, 60s, 70s cars. And when you look at them, I think, not really bucket seats, are they? Not really.
They're single seats.
There's not an awful lot of support there on the side.
No. But I had that car, you know, when I went to college in '87, so I moved to Tennessee. Well, of course, Tennessee, we get different weather patterns, and we'd occasionally get snow and icy situations. The tail of that car, it could rain hard, and I'd be going around a normal curve, and that tail would just let loose. And I got to where I was so used to it, my heart rate wouldn't even change.
Really?
I would just feel that tail going around, and I would just take the wheel and spin it back around until I leveled it out and kept going. But yeah, it was quite loose in the rear. But it ended up, in '90, I was driving to visit my mom and dad in Maryville, where we visited.
Yeah.
And I was pulling out onto a 4-lane. It was pouring down rain, and a truck, little pickup truck coming on my left side, hit it right in front of the front wheel. I don't think they had their headlights on in this pouring rain, but after the wreck, there was no way to prove it because their whole front end was destroyed.
Yeah.
But I still remember vividly the moment that thing hit, in the time it took me to spin 180 degrees, in my head I went, well, this is going to cost. and then I rolled to a stop.
Oh, dear.
Fortunately, nobody was hurt. I think I kind of bumped it caused me to bump the side window when it hit.
Yeah.
But I had a little tiny knot out of that. But, everybody was okay, and that's the main
Well,
thing.
again, that's the main thing.
But that was the end of the car. Everything windshield forward had shifted. So that was the end of that one.
Yeah, so you made me think now about this wonderful to me Mark III Cortina I had, and I had a lot of fun. I mean, endless joy as a young mechanic, keen and enthusiastic to work on the car, trying all sorts of different things. And of course, having put a V6 engine into this car, which was designed to have a 2-litre straight-four Pinto engine, that alone was quite an operation to get that engine in there. And then I had to make the exhaust system for it, and I was trying to recreate that sort of wonderful American V8 burble from a 350 engine, for example. Well, obviously I couldn't do that, but I was trying to recreate as close as I could get to that, but also keep the car street legal in terms of sound. So we had a couple of little cherry bomb exhausts that I managed to find from somewhere. Don't ask me where. One of the magazines was advertising them, Custom Car or something. And with my fellow mechanics in the garage, we all one weekend worked together to create the exhaust system, just sort of finding pieces of exhaust that no one was using from the stores and buying them cheap because they were outdated models and welding them together. And so it took a weekend to create the exhaust system for it, but just the joy of the sense of achievement of building something that didn't exist before has always stayed with me. And so trying to find things like the rubber mountings to mount the exhaust with, and going to the stores and seeing what parts Mazda were using. And then I remember the stores manager, Bob his name was, saying, you should go to this shop that deals in, I think it was old Jags, and I think you need a Jag mounting on that. It'd be just the thing for that. And then getting them and fitting them together and putting them on the car, such a joy, great fun. Loved all of that.
Well, it's quite a jump from not able to put your Speedo on your bicycle.
Well,
So-
I mean,
You said you're going to
that's right.
make strides, and you did right away.
Yeah,
So-
I never wanted to feel that sense of inadequacy, I suppose. Couldn't do it and didn't know how to do it. And I set out, yes, I mean, no, you're right. I mean, there's one thing that our little conversations down the lake bring out is you try and sort of piece together how life works. And
Yeah.
there's an example of it, yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
jumping back to your question a little earlier, my next one after the Chevelle was wrecked, for a while I had to make do with what I could drive, and it was Mom and Dad's one of their sedans, which just wasn't getting it. Being 21 years old, it was not what I wanted to drive. So I went out in search of whatever I was going to get next, and what I found was I knew these existed, and to see one today is very rare. But they were called Sun Chasers, and they were Toyota Celicas.
Oh, okay.
Late 70s into about 80, I think, is maybe when they quit. But this one company would take them, I think, brand new from Toyota, bring them to their shop in Ohio, I think it was. I think their company is called Griffith Conversions. And they would chop the top off of them, and they would mount their top on it, which was very similar to a Lancia Zagato.
Yeah.
They would have the hard top Targa that you could lift off, but the back window would fold down. It was a fold down window with a soft window.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
So
yeah.
you could have like 4 options. You could have everything off and down, or you could have just the Targa off, or just the back window down, or you could have everything sealed up. Because I thought they were great, because it was kind of a convertible. So I'd been hoping to
car,
find
yeah,
one, and
yeah.
I did find one in Knoxville. The lady was selling it because the Miata had just come out, and she had bought a new Miata and was going to let this Sun Chaser go. So that was the second car, and which was great because, like I say, I loved. It didn't have near the power or anything, but that didn't bother me. I was just enjoying having the.
It was just a cool shape that did cool things.
Yeah, I mean, it was a nice looking little Celica with the with the conversion. It was red over black. So.
Yeah, one of my favourite cars of everything that I've had, really, but one of my favourite, talking of sort of quirky designs, is definitely the Traction Avant. The Duchevaux Citroën van was very similar. I had a little Citroën Duchevaux van, 2CV, 2 horsepower really, little Citroën van. I'm not sure they ever really made it over to the States. There might be 1 or 2 over here, but perhaps not many.
I would be surprised.
France was absolutely, literally littered with them at one point. They were very cheap, very affordable, made by Citroën. Farmers had them. very softly sprung, and one of the sales points of a de chevaux van was a farmer should be allowed to carry a supply of hen's eggs to market over a ploughed field, and they should survive. So it's very softly sprung. It was an air-cooled little engine, 2-cylinder engine, but just quirky and fun, and almost impossible to destroy. You could run it and run it and run it, and they just keep going. Anyway, before that, I should say, before the de chevaux made its appearance to the world, Citroën had this car called the Traction Avant, which means front-wheel drive. And it was made, I think it was 1937, and it was an incredibly advanced car for its time. Remember, 1937, so before the start of the Second World War in Europe. And this car was front-wheel drive, and it had torsion bar suspension. Well, the great technical breakthrough in Formula One over the last 20 years has probably been torsion bars. Great suspension and do away with coil springs. And Citroën were playing with torsion bars literally decades ago. And it was also a monocoque. It was I would say it's the first monocoque car that Citroën produced, and one of the first monocoque cars in Europe. So there was no separate chassis as it would have been on your, front rails and rear rails on the Chevelle, for example. This was entirely a monocoque car, but with front-wheel drive and torsion bar suspension. And just wonderful, just a wonderful, quirky car, but great sense of motoring, a great sense of when you're driving down these old country lanes in France, that you are driving, and it's a real piece of mechanical engineering.
Oh yeah,
great fun to restore.
Yeah, I remember you mentioned that one in our episode on Great Finds. How you found was it windshield wiper regulator?
The windscreen regulator. Yes, they had this quirky design for cooling, whereas you would with a regulator, just a control knob basically, undo this control knob on the screen, and it would push the bottom of the screen forwards, so you would have great just airflow, almost like being on a motorcycle, real, as they say, fly in the face motoring, and then you could wind it back down and close it again. Yeah. I think now there are a lot more quality restoration parts for those cars, and when I was restoring them 20-something years ago, it sounds like a lot, I've restored a couple of them, but the quality of the restoration pieces that I was exposed that I could find were really very poor, and it kind of let the trade down a little bit. But I think over the years the quality of all of that stuff has come on leaps and bounds. But great fun. Yeah.
Once they see a demand for it, they can start putting it out, and it's worthwhile to do.
It was things like, Kevin, it was things that used to annoy me, but some people might not be so frustrated by it, but I would buy new front drive shaft gator boots, for example, that were rubber, and obviously over years these things corrode and fall to pieces and they need replacing. But I would find new gator boots for sale for a Traction Avant. They'd already be split down the seam line where they'd been moulded, And I think, come on, we've got to do better than this. This is no better than the part I'm replacing that's been around for 50 years. Yeah.
Oh, and actually, I kind of forgot. Actually, the Sunchaser wasn't my second car. It's kind of funny. I go back because secondary. I actually had a Porsche 914 in there.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, that one actually was after my freshman year. After my freshman year of college, we all a bunch of us guys decided to get an off-campus house.
Yeah.
And well, Mom and Dad had decided to move back to Tennessee because now they could kind of, without me being in school, high school or whatever, with being in the same house, they could go and come as they felt like. If they wanted to go to Florida for a month, they'd go. So they decided to move back to Tennessee. Well, while we're in the latter part of high school, Dad had bought an MGB, a 77 MGB, which everybody always said he kind of bought that for me to, as a nice thing for me, but always kind of said it's my car and I'll let you drive it because he hardly ever drove it. And
he was busy repairing it, let me guess. You drove it and he repaired it.
It was not the most reliable thing.
No.
But that was a very different thing. I mean, my family grew up very much four-door GM cars from as far back as I can remember.
Yeah.
Totally practical, nothing exciting.
Yeah.
But I think a friend had it and they gave him a good deal on it, and he said, what the heck, we'll get that. So when I went through my freshman year of college, summer was coming up, and I was already living in a house with some other guys. And so I'm like, well, they're moving back to Tennessee. Great, the MG will be up here. And, you know, I'll grab it and go, well, Dad sells the thing before they move.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't have bothered me as much if they were just kind of like lowering assets to make it easier to move. But he turns around and buys a 79 Monte Carlo because it was, quote, clean. So I'm like, well, that's just the same thing. You're just bringing another car up here. It was a nice looking Monte Carlo, I'll give him that, although it was green over green, which I don't know is the best color combination for a 79. But, so I'm like, okay. So part of me kind of got a little bit miffed that, I was looking forward to having the sports car again.
Yeah.
So lo and behold, I was out with one of my housemates, and we went by this used car lot, and there was this little nice-looking royal blue 914 2.0, 75 year, and 57,000 miles. And I decided on a whim I was going to test drive it. And I was used to that little MG.
Yeah.
And comparing it to this Porsche had all the power in the world compared to it, and it was just built tighter. I mean, it just felt really good. And I had all the money that I kind of saved up working in high school and stuff like that, and just had it in kind of the bank and stuff like that. And lo and behold, I just on a whim bought this car. And then having to kind of let my parents know that I'd spent all my money on this sports car.
How did they take that?
Well, they were actually handled it very well, considering, because actually we were living at a house that didn't even have a carport, and here I had this car just in the grass, and I was like, well, that's not going to work. So while they moved up there, I ended up taking up half their carport with it. And then later they moved to the house that you visited in Tennessee, the one we stayed at. And I had half the garage for a year or more. However Dad put up with that, I'll never know, but that's patience, I guess. But so I had it for a little while.
Well, you've had some very exciting cars, I must say.
Not many is the thing. I tend to hang on to them for a long, long, long time. But yeah, I think if you even count the ones that my wife has had, we've a total of 9 in my whole life. So.
Yes. Did you like that Porsche?
I do. I mean, I did. If I could have any car back I ever owned, it would be that one. And it doesn't hurt the fact that they've gone up in value. But I did sell it for more than I paid for it. I will say that. After 2 or 3 years I had it, and I sold it for a little bit more.
Well, that's always good if you can. I mean, it's a bit like a house, isn't it? I think if you can buy a house, enjoy some of your life in that house, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, whatever it is, and then sell it on and make a little money at the end of it. That's great, isn't it? I think that's a great thing. I know we're talking about cars, not houses, and I'm trying to stay on target with this one. But yes, it's the same with cars. And if you can, I don't think I've ever sold a car at a loss. I think if you can just. I tell you what, for example, that Cortina, that Mark III Cortina, I sold through I think the magazine was Custom Car, which was a UK publication, and I advertised it in the back of Custom Car, and a chap came up from London to Loughborough on the train to buy it. And I thought, as soon as he called me, I mean, obviously this is all pre-internet, pre-cell phone days, mobile days, as we would say in England. He called me and said he was coming to look at the car, and that he was coming up on the train from London. And I thought, well, there's no way this chap is not going to buy the car.
I was about to say, you kind of feel they're pretty, got a good incentive to take it and go home.
I was very confident. I must have said, I was very confident in the condition of the car. I mean, I thought it was a terrific car. So I was very pleased within myself, happy within myself that he would be happy with the car once we went for a little test drive in it. And we went for a 2 or 3 minute run around the neighbourhood in the car, and he said, absolutely, I want this car. And I think I basically doubled the money on that car. I mean, bear in mind we're not. Yeah,
you made a lot of upgrades too. So.
Bear in mind we're not talking a huge amount of money in the first place. It's probably cost me something like £300, and I sold it for £600 or something. But yes, most of that, of course, I had to do a lot of extra work. But just the fact that I managed to work on that car, enjoy that car, invest a little bit of money in the car, not lose on it, is a great feeling, isn't it? You think, that leads you on to the next thing. Yeah.
Which is hard to do because daily drivers, you can't really. They just depreciate.
Oh no,
Generally, cars are horrible investments. Collector cars can be good if you know what you're doing, and have a good stroke of luck. So.
Yes, but I think now, I mean, the whole world of the automotive world has changed. But back when we were growing up as kids, used and second-hand car market was more popular than new cars, I want to say. Like, it might be just me and my cohorts not having an awful lot of money, but no, not many people were buying new cars. The second-hand car market was huge.
Oh yeah, My parents never bought a brand new car until 1989. That was the first time they ever bought a brand new one.
Yes.
Because you don't want to take the hit. You let somebody else take the depreciation hit, and you get it after they've used it gently, hopefully, for a small amount of time. But,
going back a bit now, talking about first cars again. And remember on our episode of bicycles, I was describing how I had coming together with an 850 Mini when I was on my cycle. One of my friends, and I said then actually in that episode of Majid and the other guy, that Minis were everywhere. Like, they were extremely popular cars. They're very cheap daily drivers. And one of my school friends, he had an 850 Mini. And they were very, we all know what they look like. They're very small, very small cars, aren't they? Well, we went on an annual holiday once, driving this car with four of us, four big chaps, in that 850 Mini, including luggage, and we drove all the way down to Cornwall. I distinctly remember this and thinking, I don't know how we ever got there and back. We were so crammed in this tiny car. And we were camping as well, so we had camping equipment with us. And we got down there and we were driving around, but the Mini did seem to keep overheating. I think, not hardly surprising really. The engine was overheating. It was only a little 850 straight 4 Leyland engine. And one of my friends, he said, what we should do is let's pull the thermostat out of it and just check that the thermostat's working. So we stopped at the side of the road with a few basic tools. I mean, we were probably using Whitworth spanners instead of Imperial. Anything that we could find, we managed to take the thermostat housing off the car and take the stat out. We put it in, we boiled up some water on a campfire. So we had hot water, and we dropped the thermostat into this mug of water, determined that the thermostat wasn't working. This is at the side of the field, side of a road in a field somewhere. I'm not sure where we were, right down in Devon or Cornwall somewhere. Decided that the thermostat failed, so we just threw it away and then put the car back together without a thermostat in it. But it ran absolutely fine. We just took that problem away and never replaced the thermostat. And I don't think that car ever had its thermostat put back in it again. Several hundred miles later,
Wow.
Yes, it worked very well. Roadside repairs.
Yeah. My next after the Sun Chaser. So now I'm forgetting the Porsche because it was a side thing, but now it's 2 into regular daily drivers, and then I was out of college and starting my career, and I just kind of wanted something a little more reliable and such. I mean, the Toyota did fine. It was a Toyota product, so they obviously run well. I can't remember how many miles were on it, but it was well over 100, I'm sure. But I started shopping around, and I wasn't quite sure what I wanted, but I remember Dad saying something about, well, why don't you consider a Honda? Well, at the time I said, everybody has a Honda. I just want something different. I always like something a little different. So I was looking at this, that, and the other, and then one day I just happened, as I was shopping around, which is always kind of fun, car shopping, you jump around and try different things. I said, all right, I'll drive this Accord. And once I drove it once, I said, now I know why everybody buys a Honda. It was smooth as silk. And it was actually the next generation back. This was the one that still had the flip-up headlights.
Yeah.
And then I said, well, all right, now my mind's kind of changed. So I went around to the Honda dealerships, and I found one in Oak Ridge, which is adjacent to Knoxville, and it was the 90 model, and it was a couple of years. This was 93, so it was still a used car, but it was the newer model with the exposed headlights, not the flip-ups and all that. So it was a slight body change, and I ended up buying that. And I tell you, I think overall it's probably the best car I'll have ever owned, because it just did everything, ran like a top all the time, and just did everything it needed to do. And I put 100,000 miles of myself driving on it. So.
Japanese engineering, like German engineering, I think, is just tremendous. And again, I'm probably slightly biased towards Japanese engineering from my early days as an apprentice mechanic. That contrast between what England was producing in the 1970s, all the Leyland products, and what Japan was producing, it was just night and day. Sort of everything made sense. It was lightweight. It fitted just where it was supposed to fit on Japanese cars, I mean. And on the whole, they were incredibly reliable.
Yeah.
I think if there was a weak spot, it was probably the bodywork. Some of the bodywork would tend to rust very quickly, very thin gauge steel, but just the sense of logical design when you look at a Japanese car, Toyota or Honda or Mazda or whatever it would be, they do seem to make sense. As German engineered cars, BMW, Mercedes, Audi, Porsche, they all make sense. Some of the Italian cars don't make an awful lot of sense. We all love some of them, we're all passionately attracted to products from Italy, and some of the Leyland cars as well. The Jags would always leak oil, and the carburetors would be leaking, and the Lucas Electronics would be failing, and I was comparing that to what Japan was doing, like you say, with your Honda and Mazdas. Just a night and day difference.
Oh, yeah.
What was happening around the world. Hopefully now we've all caught up with one another.
Well, a prime example on the Honda had a retractable antenna by the trunk, and when you get in the car, if the radio was on, it automatically went up.
Yeah.
And retracted, when you turned the car off, and something hit it or something at some point and kinked it just enough to where it would not go down.
Right.
So it eventually just had to break off. So at the time I was like going, well, it's going to be kind of expensive. So I just took a wire hanger and made it perfectly straight and put a little turn at the top so you wouldn't poke your eye out with it. And I just kind of attached it inside there. But until I actually had that telescopic antenna fixed a few years later, every time you turned that car on or off, the motor still went. It always did what it was supposed to do. Well, the car I ended up buying after that one was a Volvo C70.
Okay.
Again, that was my first foray, minus the Porsche, into a European daily driver, and actually kind of a luxury car. The opposite. On any given day, the antenna might decide, I'm just not going to work. I'll work today, I won't work tomorrow. This light will come on today, it'll be gone tomorrow. I didn't have it 2 weeks, and there was one door indicator light that was going off like it shouldn't be.
Like Chitty Bang Bang, really. It's got its own personality.
I guess.
Yeah, it's going to work today.
It did fine. I drove it for 175,000 miles, but it was European, and it had European quirks to it, whereas the Japanese car just did exactly what it's supposed to do every single time.
Well, that description you've just given us about putting a coat hanger as an aerial, that's been kind of universal aerial in the automotive trade for as long as I can remember.
Yeah. But again, I was like say very fastidious. I made sure it was straight as an arrow. I got a good thick gauge one that wasn't white or something. It was a nice sheen of whatever it was, but it worked. Solved the problem for a while.
Yeah. Those first cars, that we all have, they form lifelong memories in a way that cars that we have these days, just daily runarounds, don't seem to have a sort of that strong memory.
They don't have the personality.
They don't have the personality. That's exactly right. Yeah.
Well, and how many of them look just alike? They're just starting to get more,
I don't know if that's just the change in engineering or change in finances as we hopefully move through life and make progress, or the delight in just keeping something running when you're a younger person, you haven't got an awful lot of disposable income, and you need that car to keep running. Yeah. I had one of my early cars as well. I'm not sure how I ended up with this. One of those buying and selling, a little bit of horse trading, as you describe it. My granddad and my dad would love that expression of horse trading because they did used to horse trade, actually. We'll get into that in another conversation. I ended up with an Austin Princess, which is a fairly terrible car. And look it up online and you'll see what it's like. But the joy of an Austin Princess, and there weren't many joys of owning an Austin Princess. Once again, it was a front-wheel drive Leyland car. But the joy of an Austin Princess was, if you wanted to go away for the weekend camping and it was pouring down with rain, or you simply didn't want to use the tent, or you didn't have a tent but you wanted to stay away for the weekend, you could lay the seats down, the front seats, pull the seats as far forward as you could get them to go on their railings, and lay the seats flat, and they would form a perfect mattress, if you liked, with the rear seats. So the entire interior of the car was like a bed. Yeah. And so if you had sleeping bags and a couple of pillows, you could go camping in the car. used to do that quite regularly. It was, yes, not many cars, and of course we talk about bucket seats or not being bucket seats, as the case may be. These seats were pretty much flat. Yeah, so it was just one of those quirks of design. I'm sure they never intended it to be this way, but yeah, you could live in the car for the weekend. So there you are, gentle listener. If you're looking for a cheap caravan, have a look online, see if you can get hold of an Austin Princess. You won't regret it, or perhaps you will.
And I'm sure there's just a plenty here in the U.S.
I suspect.
Check with CarMax, see if they have one.
I suspect they were so unreliable. With all due respect to the Austin Princess, I bet there are not many in England. Oh, God. I imagine they were one of the first cars to become cube-shaped when that technology opened up in scrapyards.
Yeah, or become piles of brown powder at this point.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Well, this is definitely a topic that we can continue on and such. And I think we'll have to revisit. And no, we're going to do a lot of car talk down the line. So
yes.
But today I think we have to wrap
it was
it up.
fun. Yeah, I would never have thought about that Austin Princess, probably for the rest of my life, Kevin, if we hadn't been having this conversation today at the side of the lake. So that's a great fun thing to do, isn't it? Just to reminisce about those things.
Well, I guess this does what a therapist would do. It brings out those those deep-rooted memories. Be them good, be them bad. Here they are.
Yeah.
And hopefully they're good.
Make a radio aerial out of a bent piece of wire, or use an Austin Princess as a temporary caravan if you need to go away for the weekend. It's kind of a public service we supply here.
That's right.
In a way, isn't it?
Consider this a survivalist guide in however way it needs to be.
Well, it looks like we've run out of time again. So we better think about wrapping it up and saying goodbye. So from me, I'm going to say thanks very much for listening, gentle listener, and join us next time. And Kevin, what have you got to say?
We'll see you soon.
See you soon. Take care. Bye.